So we are here today making an oral history of the past presidents of TCDLA. And I believe your president's address was titled On the Shoulders of Giants. Was that it?
I don't remember.
No?
No.
I think it was titled On the Shoulders of Giants.
Could
so
be.
It's appropriate that we are making this oral history about you specifically.
Okay.
Do you know that you're a legal giant in Texas?
People have told me that.
How's that make you feel?
Humble.
Humble.
Humble. There are people that I consider icons, and Goldstein, Scrappy, Botsford, Will Gray, Marvin T, Warren Burnett, Ames. Those are the people that I looked up to.
So can you tell us what are these men that you've just named? What do they share? What characteristic do they share that makes them icons for you?
Warren Burnett had a voice. Ames had a voice. And their voices resonated in the room and drew the attention of everyone that heard their voice. And I wanted to learn to use my voice like a Warren Burnett. But it had to be me, but listening to Warren talk in court was just mesmerized by him. And the first time I saw Haynes in trial, I just could not believe how he captured the moment. When he said, "May I publish the letter to the jury?"
That's interesting. So you talk about finding your voice. You know, on your CV, you list right under your law school, Spence's Delaware College as your formal education.
Yeah.
Did that help you?
Yeah. Jerry, and that's been a privilege also working with Spence and having him as a teacher, and John Ackerman as a teacher. They helped me. He helped give me my voice and give me the ability to talk in a courtroom. I've always had ability. I've had ability to talk, but really to be heard.
Explain that, to be heard. What do you mean?
Spence teaches that you create a group in the courtroom between the jury and your client, and the group protects its own. But in order to form a group, you have to be real and show who you are as a person, not as a lawyer. And being a person is so much more. Being a person is more than being a lawyer. And being a lawyer, to be effective, you have to be a person.
You have spoken about our responsibility as lawyers, and it is to take on our clients' pain and their suffering in order to tell their story.
Right.
Why do you say that? Why is that important for lawyers?
Well, it goes back to what Spence teaches. You can't, a juror from River Oaks in Houston can't feel for a elderly black woman from 3rd Ward unless there's some commonality of experiences, unless you can explain the emotion that drove the person to do the crime or to do what they are accused of, or to be involved in what they're accused of, unless you can understand the emotional basis for it. You have to communicate that emotion, so you have to feel it. So it has to be real. If you can't be real, you can't try a case.
And what you're describing, that's on top of all the other things that you have to do in order to be a good lawyer in a courtroom, yes?
Yes. That's just that's the crescendo.
Well said. Why don't you tell us how you got here? Let's back up. Where are you from?
Schenectady, New York. I applied to 4 law schools in 1970, got rejected by all 4 in 71, and an advisor said some school in Texas wants Yankees, and so I applied to that law school and got accepted, and packed everything I had in the back of a '64 Chevy and drove to Texas.
Did you make it here in one piece?
I made it in one piece, but I realized that the 64 Chevy didn't have air conditioning. And so the term 440, four windows open at 40 miles an hour was my air conditioning. I had that car for over 3 years until I got, for 3.5 years. I had to get some money saved up before I could buy a car.
When you applied to law school, did you have criminal law in mind?
No, I had this vision of getting an MBA, JD, and spending a year in London, studying business and going into international law.
Well, how did your eggs get scrambled in law school that you ended up working in prisons? That was your first job out, wasn't it?
I got a job in a prison. I was looking for a job in Texas, and someone said, the guy I worked for said there was he had a friend who was director of a bunch of staff attorneys in prison, and applied for a job, and took my 64 Chevy and drove to Huntsville and went to work in Huntsville.
So was that your first exposure to criminal
law? Yeah. Well, except for some court-appointed cases that the lawyers I worked for had in San Antonio, and there was one a year for each of them. And I worked on those, and that was my first exposure, was working in a prison representing inmates.
So right out of law school, did you open up your own shop? Did you go work for somebody else?
Well, law school, I went to the prison for 39 months, represented inmates. The first week on the job, I had my boss came in and said, "Here, write a brief for the Fifth Circuit." And I said, "What's the Fifth Circuit?" And wrote the brief. My first court appearance was in Otoka, Oklahoma, on a termination of parental rights case. I think my fourth or fifth court appearance was oral arguments in the Fifth Circuit within 6 months of being licensed to practice law.
So you got dropped in the deep end?
Yeah.
Quickly?
And it was sink or swim.
Really swum?
Yeah. I think I got licensed in October of '74, and by April of '75, I had 2 Fifth Circuit arguments.
Wow.
Under my belt.
We said here today, how many times have you argued at the Fifth Circuit?
I don't know, 20, 30.
You've been to the Supreme yet, Sam?
No, not yet.
Anything on the horizon?
I'll let you know June 24th.
Fair enough. So when you left the prison system, what was the catalyst for leaving the prison system?
I was married, and we were looking for a place to light, and ended up in moving to Houston, and moved in with lawyers named Mark Bale and Terry Collins.
So were you a solo practitioner?
Not yet. No one would hire me, and I just started working.
How soon, how did you meet your partner, Troy McKinney? How long had you been together?
1985.
You know, that's longer than most marriages, right?
Yeah.
How did you meet Troy?
I was judging a moot court competition at South Texas College of Law, and he argued. He was fantastic, and the following Saturday he showed up at my door looking for a job as a law clerk.
And the answer was yes?
Yeah, he came to work for me. About 2 weeks later, we started arguing about a case, and he had this whole theory based on a 1936 case on false entry on a governmental record. And we argued about that for about an hour or two, and I said, "Go write it." We wrote the brief. I argued the case, didn't argue that point. Judge Murray Cohn, who at the time of the arguments Troy was clerking for, took his sufficiency argument, and I got 10 acquittals.
Took Troy's sufficiency argument?
Yep.
The one you didn't argue?
The one I didn't argue, the one I thought was, how could they rely on a 1936 case? And
Is that when you decided you might want to keep that kid?
well, I already. That's right. He was already committed to coming back to me.
Right.
The plan was that as soon as he finished the year with Murray, as soon as he finished that year with Murray, he was going to come back and work for me.
All right.
And that was 1987.
So, when did you make him a partner?
Early 90s.
Early 90s. That's just, what's it like today, Victor? How's that partnership that you guys have stayed together that long? Seriously, I mean, that's a coup. There aren't many criminal law practices that can, partnerships that stay together like that.
We complement each other. We do different things. We respect each other's ability.
You still differ about cases?
Yeah. He still tells me I'm wrong, or Troy stays in the box, and I'm out of the box.
Good description. I'm going to read you right. Do you remember the first time you heard about TCDLA?
No. I do know that in 1979, I was a member of the strike force for TCDLA. And I was at I was down in the valley with a friend, and he said, here, he handed me a voice for the defense from 1979. And there I was, listed as a member of the strike force in the magazine.
How did you get on the strike force?
I'm not really sure.
Somebody volunteered you?
Someone volunteered me, and I was on the strike force.
Were you even a member of TCDLA?
I had to be a member. I probably joined as soon as I went to private practice. That's what I'm guessing. I do remember my first seminar for TCDLA.
Tell us about it.
It was in Longview, Texas, in September of 1974. And what I remember most about it, Scrappy probably was the course director, but mid-morning on a Saturday morning, it was a Friday-Saturday seminar, and someone said, you got to come see this, and I walked out of the seminar, and there was a bright yellow Lamborghini parked in front of the Holiday Inn or whatever hotel it was at, and lawyer Haynes, Racehorse Haynes, was about to speak. And Racehorse had left Houston about 6 o'clock in the morning to drive to Longview, and his yellow Lamborghini. And I marvel at the fact that there's a room full of lawyers, and Haynes has said, I want you all to get up, walk out of this room, and jump into the roadway down out there. Every lawyer in that room would follow Haynes out like the Pied Piper, and those rats, and we would all jumped into the roadway.
Is that the voice that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, it's just the voice, the mesmerizing voice, the soothing voice, the voice you want to listen to. You know, back when Haynes and Scrappy and Warren Burnett grew up, people didn't watch TV and play computer games. They listened to people speak. They became orators, and the spoken word meant something.
Do you remember who the first criminal lawyer you met, that when you were introduced, you were just absolutely starstruck?
Well, the first one I saw was Warren Burnett. And I heard that it was a great lawyer in trial in San Antonio. I was a first-year law student. And I went to watch him one day. And that trial lasted 2 weeks. I was there every afternoon for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Until one day I walked in the courtroom and everyone was gone. I said, what happened? And the defendant pled guilty.
After 2 week trial?
Yeah. And Warren Burnett told me years later that he was promised probation. And the judge reneged and gave him 10 years in prison time. I later represented that particular young man.
On an appeal or a different case?
Different case,
Wow.
years later.
So who was the first lawyer that you were in the presence of where you had that, oh my, is this the real in-person person?
Haynes probably. I saw Mike Ramsey in trial with Bob Bennett in 75 or 76 in Huntsville. I watched Stu Keinhardt try a murder case in Huntsville where his self-defense claim was based upon a voodoo curse was placed on his client, and his client was told the only way to rid the curse was to kill the person that orchestrated the curse on him.
Did it lift the curse?
It lifted the curse, but he went to prison for 7 years.
Remember what the curse was?
I have no idea, but I just remember watching Stu Kiner, who was a great lawyer from Houston. He's in our Hall of Fame.
When you say our Hall,
TCDLA. Trying to tell a jury about a curse and why someone would kill someone to get rid of a curse was just. And Ramsey and Bennett were representing some cops who tried to see if a Hispanic man, Joe Campos Torres, could swim across Bray's Bayou with handcuffs behind his back. Something about him drowning didn't like that.
All of the lawyers that you've described, were they all involved with TCDLA members?
Stu was. Haynes was one of the founders. They weren't really active in TCDLA. Warren Burnett wasn't active. Percy helped was one of the founders of TCDLA back in '71.
Can you tell us what made you want to be active in this organization?
There's a camaraderie within the organization. We're alone in what we do. No one likes us. The public doesn't like us. The judges don't like us. The prosecutors don't like it. And you're by yourself trying cases, and you learn new ideas. You learn what people are doing. You listen and you learn, and then you become friends. When you're in trial with somebody, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, you form a bond based on trust. And when you form that bond based on trust, there's this special relationship. And across the state, when you have that commonality of losses and experiences, it creates a bond. So I think I spoke my first seminar about '83.
You remember the topic?
Commutations of death penalty cases. And then I've spoken at seminars off and on for the last 30 years. I was on the board for 6 years, 9 years, whatever it was. I was on CDLP. Just been involved. It's been a lot of fun. And made some really close friends. Botsford and I have had dinner together. This may be the second time in 20 years that we didn't have dinner together on Wednesday night before Rusty.
And why is that?
Why didn't we have it?
Tonight? Yeah, last night?
Botsford had to get ready for trial.
Oh, work getting in the way.
Yeah, and Botsford's just so anal. He just has to get ready to pack his bags and move to El Paso.
Now, David Botsford's former president of TCDLA.
Yes.
And David was mindful of the lack of female leadership in this organization. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I was responsible for the Lydia Clay Jackson amendment to the bylaws.
What is the Lydia Clay Jackson amendment to the bylaws?
You had to be a member of the board for at least 3 years to be eligible to be an officer. Lydia was chair of CDLP for ages. She was chair of LEI for ages. She's been the dean of the trial college for 20 years, but she's never been on the board of TCDLA.
Why is that?
She didn't want it. She had other things she was doing, so why bother? Is what she says. And so we had to change the bylaws to make her eligible to be an officer. And it took me 2 years to do that. And then as soon as the bylaws passed, she became an officer.
And then president.
And then president. And there is a lack of women. There's a lack of diversity.
Why does that even matter?
I was standing up in front of giving a speech here at Rusty many years ago, and looked out and I saw myself in the mirror. And I saw older white men, all over 50, out in the audience. And the demographics of Texas, demographics of lawyers in the state, they're Hispanic, they're black, they're women. They're the people who were the leaders of the criminal bar 30 years ago. We're getting older. We need bright people to be leaders in this organization. We need people who are trial lawyers, who are committed to justice, to be leaders of this organization. We need to have people who care about their clients, be leaders of this organization. And so we need to get these people dragging, kicking and screaming into TCDLA, because this organization, we do a lot of good. We make a difference. We have 46 seminars a year. We reach and train 8,000 lawyers a year. Maybe they're repetitious, but we make a difference to people because we work with people and we represent people. And the only thing that stands between tyranny and freedom are the lawyers.
Well, I think you can also say that TCDLA helps the lawyers as well. That camaraderie that you talked about.
Well, yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's a big part because we're alone otherwise. And the lawyer calls you up for help. When I was my first capital murder case, John Henry Quinones in 1978. I remember it was a Thursday night, and I got the jury charge, and I'd never seen anything this bad. I was a baby lawyer for 4 years. I called a man named Marvin Tigo, and Marvin and I talked about the jury charge. We worked on it together for 2 hours on the phone. And then the following morning, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I met him at the courthouse, and we worked on it some more. And he didn't have to help me. He never met me before. But I was in trial in a capital murder case, and I needed help. And he stopped what he was doing and helped me.
So, young lawyers, I have personally tried several cases with you now. What advice would you give a young lawyer that wants to attempt to attain what you've attained in your career? I mean, green, straight out of school, without a ticket, will practice.
Get involved.
In?
TCDLA. Go to seminars. Go to board meetings. Write papers. Give a speech. If you write a paper, you have to learn the law. If your paper gets published, your name will get out there. If you give a speech, you're out there, you have to prepare. And you get used to talking in public about legal matters, and people are going to listen to you. And the more involved you are, you're going to sit around and listen to stories from great people. Listening to John Ackerman and Scrappy Holmes talk about life is a lesson that you pay money for.
Absolutely, I've been privy to those conversations. You don't need a TV. I could listen to them.
It's better than almost anything else in the world to do. Haynes talks about how whiskey makes him great. Well, sitting around listening to war stories from Goldstein and Tim Evans and Scrappy and Ackerman, and you start hearing about the old days and when the Fourth Amendment really meant something. When there was respect for individuals.
Right now, as we sit here today, you have many more years of practice left than you. Can we agree with that?
All right.
Yes, we can agree with that.
All right.
Before you decide to stop practicing law, is there a lawyer that you think, I want to try a case with that person?
Oh, there's
Right.
many.
Who is it?
Well, I want to try a case with Scrappy.
Have you never tried a case with Scrappy?
Never tried a case with Scrappy. Bosser and I have done many hearings together. We've worked on cases together. We've never been in a jury trial together.
That, I'm shocked for that.
We've done a lot of stuff together. Worked on, he grades my papers on a regular basis, and vice versa. I get briefs and I read them and call up and say, "What about doing it this way? And what about this argument?" And we do that. At least 6-7 times a year. We talk at least twice a week. Either he calls or I call about law, shit, just anything.
Whatever's going on.
Yeah. I'd love to do something with Goldstein. Try a case with Goldstein.
That seems like it would be fun.
I've worked. One of the greatest lectures on expert witnesses I've ever attended started about 2 o'clock in the morning as we were preparing for a hearing in Laredo, and we were working, and this lawyer, Kurt Sauer, asked Goldstein a question. And I have a vision of Goldstein laying on the bed, start expounding about crossing an expert witness, and we had this discussion among the three of us. I think Cynthia Over walked in at some point in the night, in the middle of the discussion, and the four of us talked about cross-examination for about an hour and a half.
Wow.
And getting up at 7 and being in a courtroom fresh as a daisy, ready to go. And we went all day, and then went all night again the next night. And the guy's name was Eroy Martinez.
It's funny. It's not funny, haha. It's interesting to me how quickly you pull up your clients' names and how quickly all of the stories that come after your clients. You've been practicing 39 years. Is that right?
Yes.
Over that 39-year career, Stanley, if you look over that 39 years, is there one case that just left an indelible mark on you?
Not a case. I represent a man named Juan Alex. I met Juan Alex at a client's funeral. He spoke. And at this funeral, he blamed all the problems of the black community on the Jewish people. And it was the first time in many, many years that I had been a victim of anti-Semitic. Because I was the only white person at the funeral, and Juan Al knew who I was, because I was representing his cousin at the time. And we had words. Years later, I represented Juan Al, and I learned his story, and he learned my story, and we went to trial, and we won. And then months later, Juan Al and I visited the Holocaust Museum in Houston. And as Juan Al was walking through the museum, he saw Hitler's words about the Jewish people. And he stopped and said, "Those were my words. Those are my words of hate. I was wrong. I'm sorry."
That's a very touching story. Do you consider Juan a friend today?
Sometimes I think it was an adopted son.
So you forgave him?
Yeah. I understood where he came from. I understood where the words came from. I understood the feeling.
I have found that since I've been practicing criminal defense that forgiveness, grace comes easier for me in my personal life when people wrong me or relationships outside of the courtroom. And I think it makes me a better person in real life as opposed to in the courtroom.
Well, what we learn is life is gray.
Fair enough. Well said, it's great.
And it's just a degree of darkness and lightness that goes with it. There is no black, there is no white. No. And it's just very, very light gray or very, very dark gray.
So let me ask you specifically, how, if it has, How has being a criminal defense lawyer affected your personal life, the rest of your life? If it has, is it good, is it bad?
I can't, I'm a lawyer. That's who I am. It's my being, it's my essence. Botsra and I have discussed this many nights into several bottles of grape juice, discussing the philosophy of life and I'm a lawyer. It's who I am. It defines me. And it's what I love. When they say the law is a jealous mistress, it's a demanding mistress. And it creeps into every aspect of my life. And it hurts it, it harms it, it grows it. It's all, parts of it's good, parts of it's bad.
So, again, 39 years, when you look back over that, do you have to do anything differently?
There's some things I would do differently.
Home earlier, dinner, maybe?
That would change anything.
Again, I believe you've got many years of practice left in you. And if that means I have to drag you to the office to ensure that happens, I'm happy to do that.
Casey, just because you're joined at the hip with me and trying cases, we have 6 trials coming up this year?
Correct, so don't get any ideas of retirement anytime soon. When and if you ever leave the practice of law, what do you hope, what do you want your legacy to have been?
There have been people's lives I've touched. There are clients that call me dad. There are people that keep coming back, just saying hi. That made a difference. I'd like somebody 30 years from now saying, I tried a case with Stan Schneider and maybe there's some young lawyer, maybe you'll be in this chair in 10 years talking about the burnt vagina case and spanking yourself in a courtroom. And telling the world how you like it, rough sex.
Yeah. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll just let that go down the pages.
Well, this will be on the TCLA website forever.
Thank you for that, Mr. Schneider. Thank you for that, Mr. Schneider. And on that note, do you have any other parting words for the membership?
No.
And that'll be all, folks.
Yes.
Hi, Scrappy Moms.
Hi.
You know this fellow sitting right here to your right?
A little bit.
How do you know him?
Well, I've been around since he started practicing law again.
I'm guessing Scrappy was the course director of that first seminar I went to.
In Longview?
In Longview in '74 with Haynes in the yellow Lamborghini.
Do you remember the yellow Lamborghini?
I rode all over Texas in it.
I can only imagine. So tell us a story about Mr. Schneider that you probably wouldn't want you to tell and probably wouldn't want on the TCDLA website.
I don't know stories such as that on this young man. I know him to be a good father, a hell of a mate for his sweet wife Susan. I know that he smokes only the finest cigars, and that he has been known a little bit to drink a glass of wine or two.
That's just rumor, though, right?
Mostly rumor.
Okay.
What about tequila?
You weren't supposed to tell him about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He does pick up good tequila.
Did you know that this young man right here considers you a legal icon? You're at the top of that list.
His icon, one of those things on a computer screen that you can touch.
Ask him. Was that it? You got a Scrappy icon on your desktop?
No, but he is one up here in my mind.
we've had lots of conversations, and they flowed both ways, because I've frequently called him and say, Stanley, what the hell have I got myself into?
Does he help you out with that?
Oh, sure. He's, I'm sitting there really trying to figure out. Stan's always been around. Is that right?
Yeah.
Always. I don't care if something was happening in Austin, he was there. If it's happening in Amarillo, he was there. He's just always been around.
Well,
Because he's good at what he does.
Well, and he's good at listening. He's told us earlier about your ability to tell a story is captivating. And so if he's not running up to Austin, he's likely sitting somewhere near you listening to you.
Well, they accuse me of telling stories. I'm trying to tell the truth.
So I'm not commenting on Nebraska stories.
You know, one of the things that we talked about is being real. Being real in the courtroom. And anybody who can talk a jury into acquitting a man who shoots someone in the back 6 times or 9 times has a gift to tell the story that caused the person to shoot someone in the back 9 times. Am I right, 9 times?
Yeah, 9 times in Tyler and 11 times, I think, in Mount Pleasant.
Same thing?
No, 2 different ones. We're close together. They're the same kinds of shots.
Wow. All the way back.
Yeah.
That's
The
impressive.
guy was obviously going for a weapon or something.
Obviously.
Obviously. And they obviously deserve to kill him.
Yeah, that's the best defense.
So,
What year were you president, Scrappy?
A long time ago. 85? Wasn't it? I don't know. I think so.
Were you a member of TCDLA right when it got started?
I couldn't join the first 6 or 8 months because I was working doing seminars and stuff for the state bar, and they decided that would be a conflict. So as soon as I got through doing what I was doing there, I joined in 1972.
Between 1972 and sitting here today, what's the biggest change that you've seen with TCDLA in this organization from then to now?
And I'm not being critical. I think in the early days, there was a larger sense of camaraderie, really, that you not just practiced law in the same realm, try the same kinds of cases, do the same thing, you were, it was a friendship thing, a really friends, and since the early 70s, the best friends I have are members of TCDLA. I mean, we lived our lives together. We shared together, had the same goals, and so that's a negative. And I suppose you want it on both sides. I wish that would get back. I wish it would come back. And I don't know why it changed. Maybe just in size, but
It's interesting to me, Scotty. I don't know if you were in the room, but when I was talking with Stanley about this organization, he said the same thing, that camaraderie, that sense of group and family, because this is a very lonely profession. We're solo practitioners. We don't have that synergy that comes with working with other folks.
see how smart I am.
Well, clearly. One of you's rubbing off on the other one.
It's when you say those things, that's not negative. That's bullshit on our part, trying to convince people to get as concerned about that as we are, and maybe get it back where it was. We used to, when we had the president's trips, hell, we'd fill up a hotel.
How many were on the last president's trip?
well, that's one that we went on. It was 20.
Yeah.
We had 30 on my trip.
That almost, I watch you guys together, and I've spent many an evening on the patio with the stories and the maybe not so wine, but some grape juice. And I feel like as a young lawyer, I'm 8 years practice, almost jealous, like that you all have that group of lawyers that have been so close for so long, and just that network. I'm envious of that.
Of course, I'm less than a year away from 3/4 of a century. And I look back to the lawyers that were here then. I mean, hell, I tried cases against Judge Arisman. I tried cases.
Oh, this is blank looking at who's Arisman. Arisman, reversible error in Texas.
Arisman, it's on my desk, yes.
Arisman.
Arisman.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's from Longview. I tried cases with him. Lawyers like Joe Tannehill. I tried cases with Joe Tannehill, with all the old Dallas greats that are all gone now. Eric, Emmett Colvin, that bunch. And
talk about Warren Burnett.
oh yeah, I tried cases with Warren, criminal and civil, and got to sit on the beer place in Austin. What's that outside beer place?
Schultz.
Some garden.
Schultz's
Garden. And listen to him tell his little boy stories. But that group were friends. They hung out together. They went places together.
Well, here's another one. Pull up a chair, Jerry.
There's another one. Here's
What
what
about
I
you?
Has your ears been ringing, Mr. Goldstein?
We're talking about you, Joe.
Goldstein, pull a chair up here. We're on camera.
Oh, with my heroes.
To the right, Mr. Schneider, so that we can
Here. Put it in the middle.
Right.
He's all dressed up.
I wouldn't want to come between Stan and Scrappy.
There's no wine or whiskey, between us.
Do you know that I had a case with him? How we met, I represented him. He had been a judge.
Was this your defendant?
No, he was actually a plaintiff.
I was a plaintiff.
Oh.
And we were suing the fucking municipal...
Kilgore.
Texas. And we were sitting at a table for a deposition. You know, I was a baby criminal defense lawyer. I had no idea what a deposition was. But my first deposition, in the middle of the table was this pecan. Not a pecan, but a can of peas.
Right.
With no peas in it. And I noticed that people kept spitting. And I noticed that after a while, my papers were getting brown around the edges. And I noticed that nobody else got their papers near the pecan. And, team was smooth. And that was my introduction to civil practice. And I thought, in criminal cases, nobody sits around a pecan spitting. If they're going to spit, they spit on you. They're not going to. They're not going to be. You're not just going to get discolored.
The first time I talked to him was 1975, when I was about to go in the Army, and I went to Goldstein to represent me and to keep me out of the Army.
That's what we did in those days. I can tell you that the reason I went to law school in 1965 was in order to stay out of the draft, because they had sent me a notice saying it's your turn to kill or be killed.
I didn't know this about you, Stanley. I didn't know that Mr. Goldstein had kept you out of the Army.
I didn't have to.
I had a much better shot at it.
Yeah.
I came on the cusp.
I got you.
I got
After Korea and before Vietnam.
he hooked me up with a new senator, Lloyd Benson,
Ah,
That's true.
and I went up to Lloyd Benson's office and met a guy named Bob Block, and Bob Block said, because I flunked my physical the June before, the senator worked his magic, and abracadabra, I was not in the Army anymore.
abracadabra.
And Goldstein sent me to the senator.
The best case that we were ever involved in together, though, was in Canton, Texas.
Oh, shit. Right. This was.
Van Zandt County, the free state of Van Zandt.
And you got to understand that we got there because we represented these African American twins,
Identical.
identical twins, and they claimed they could tell them apart by looking at a voice spectrogram.
What year was this?
Had to be in the late 70s.
Right.
Yeah, and they would listen to them, and the tapes would go much like this. Yeah, mo, yeah, mo, yeah, mo.
So clearly they had a wide,
They both had the
great
same
samples.
name.
They had the same.
They had the same name,
But-
they called one another.
But
the
other than
same
Earl
name.
Campbell, they
Right.
were the two most famous football players that ever came out of Tyler, Texas.
Fantastic.
And they couldn't get a jury. They spent 2 years. We would get panels. Just nobody wanted to convict these guys. So the judge had to change a venue to Canton, Texas, where the courthouse. We were greeted. They had planted Confederate flags, hundreds of them, in the steps, and
That's a hell of a welcoming wagon.
it was because they were, even the janitors were white in Canton, Texas. This was a white flight neighborhood like you'd never seen, and our clients were carrying our briefcases because Scrappy had found an office across the street from the
This lasted 7 weeks.
the
Wow.
courthouse, and the judge made a comment out the window. I wish I had a pen to carry my bag. And the court reporter who would come, she was screaming, took it down. And ultimately, that and a preacher's wife in the jury panel who stood up, and the judge made the mistake. He wouldn't let us ask any more about the water tower. They used to say the blackest soil and the whitest citizens in
Right.
Texas. They wouldn't give them that
Don't let the sun set on
on your ass. And so he wouldn't let us ask. He said, I made the mistake of saying, any of y'all have any other questions? And the woman said, I'm the preacher's wife here in town. I just want you to know, Judge, these people are lying to you. Out there, they're talking about going out and tarring and feathering. And all this is in the record.
Well, and
We had
you
some-
know what? That story is the reason that we're making this oral history, because
Well, but
what
you
we
got-
have today was not what it was then.
The denouement is all of that perfectly preserved, 100 witnesses, and our Court of Criminal Appeals said what's wrong with that.
Oh, and by the way, not to reverse that. By the Court of Appeals. Here's what was amazing. Okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah.
Thank you, fellas,
You got
for the interview.
We may have gone over a minute or two, didn't we?
Yeah. By the way, you do need to hear Warren won't mind. We're gonna
Yes,
get-
I will.
You will?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. The DEA agent gets up and he's got his body armor on and he says, this is the most